Hey there, Gothamites. Welcome to a very special episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and now San Diego, California. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. So we just got back from San Diego Comic-Con, and we're so excited for you to hear and watch our panel all about X-Men 97.
Before we do that, though, we have an announcement to make, and that is that our poll has officially ended. We know now what we are covering after X-Men Season 1. There were 4 options. There were X-Men Season 2. There was Gargoyles Season 1. There was Batman, the Caped Crusader Season 1. And then there was Harley Quinn Season 1. So a pretty nice mixture. Drea, you were hoping for something in particular at one point. How did that do in the polls for you?
What I wanted got 0 votes, but that's totally fine.
0 votes.
It's all good because, you know, like we said last time, these are all fantastic shows. We might actually cover all of them at some point. So
I'm sure we will.
There are no L's here. We are super excited because we will finally be covering Harley Quinn, the animated series. So we'll start fresh in August with episode 1. Please stay tuned for more on that. It'll be the first episode following our San Diego Comic-Con panel episode.
Yep. You can find Harley Quinn Season 1, if you're not already familiar with it, over on Max. Some people still call it HBO Max, but you can find it there. They have all of the episodes available. So if you want to get ahead of our analysis, go to Max now and start streaming. In a couple of weeks, you're going to hear our very first analysis. It is a very funny show. It is also a surprisingly deep show, and we're just happy that we are returning to Gotham City. With that being said, Drea, I want to ask you what you thought about Comic-Con in general. To me, it seemed like we were sort of back to pre-pandemic era. There were fewer activations outside, which means there were a lot more people inside the convention center. The hall or the aisles got super crowded, but people seemed to be enjoying themselves and seemed to be ready to spend some money on all of their favorite stuff. What did you think of the convention?
I thought it was great. Yes, very crowded, but what I tell folks is San Diego has one of the largest, I think the largest comic convention in the entire US and is probably the largest in the world. So prepare for over 100,000 peers when you go there. So I knew what I was getting into. I actually had the delight of inviting some colleagues from UCLA to spend their weekend at their very first Comic-Con.
Have you heard from them?
I did, and they said it was a blast, and they said also very crowded. So, okay. All in all, a very positive experience. The highlight for me was our panel, The Psychology of X-Men 97. It was a delight to panel next to Lenore Zahn, Allison Seeley Smith, J.B. Ballard, and Jake Castorena, who are all the creative force behind X-Men 97. Lenore and Allison were truly spectacular on this panel. I really urge you to watch or to listen to this episode because they really bring in some vulnerability, some wisdom, some resilience. All their storytelling is just truly, truly magical. It really is a one-of-a-kind episode for us because we don't have guests. So when we do panels, it's as if we have guests on the show to interview. So I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it's a real tearjerker. I hope you enjoy. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward. You can find me on Instagram. I am B_Ward028. You can find us both on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. Come follow us on Facebook. Join our Patreon over at patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. And then, Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you?
Do not forget about our Discord. I'm our Discord mama. So please come check out the Discord channel. It is absolutely free. You can find the link on our Instagram bio page. and we will welcome you. We have community chats, sometimes we stream stuff, but overall it's just a fun place to chat about your fandoms, what you thought about our show, and also just getting to know one another. So it's a very fun, safe, and just like overall a good time at our Discord. So please join us. Lastly, you can find my stuff on Instagram, Dr. Drea Psychology. I posted a bunch of stuff about Comic-Con. And we have, of course, our new season coming up, and you'll find all of that good stuff
right here. That's right. So until next time, thanks everybody for joining us. And please now enjoy our 2024 San Diego Comic-Con panel examining the X-Men 97.
Where are my Homo sapiens at? Where are my Homo superior at? That's how we know we're going to have a good time. My name is Brian Ward. I am the co-host of a podcast called the Arkham Sessions. We take pop culture and run it through the very critical lens of a clinical psychologist. Basically, we're giving you the medicine wrapped up in sugar, and tonight's Sugar is a show that is so good. It has no right to be this good. It is the two-time Emmy Award nominee, X-Men 97. These folks up here have killed it, as have many folks who are still here at the convention who have worked on this show. We're just so proud of all of you. Thank you for landing this reboot, sequel series. Not many people can pull that off, and you've just knocked it out of the park. Joining me, as always, is my favorite clinical psychologist. She is, her day job is at UCLA. Her nighttime job is as a consultant to writers of film, television, books, comic books. Really, if you want to write it, she'll help you consult about the psychology of it. She's even been written into DC canon as Barbara Gordon's therapist in Batgirl. She's Dr. Drea Letterman.
Thank you.
Right next to her, a gentleman who wrote one of the most gut-wrenching episodes of this season, Bright Eyes. Please welcome Mr. J.B. Ballard.
Remember it. Remember it.
Next to him, supervising producer and director, Mr. Jay Casarena. We are so fortunate to be joined by two amazing voice actors, not just from this season, but coming back from the original X-Men the Animated Series. Please welcome the voice of Storm, Miss Allison Seeley-Smith. And the voice of Rogue, Miss Lenore Zan. So just quickly, I'm going to throw a softball to you. I'm going to a little icebreaker here. We, I'm sure, all want to know about our first experiences with the X-Men. Drea, starting with you, we'll work our way down to the left. Tell us about your introduction to these iconic characters.
Okay, so I was a child in '92, a little bit lonely, a little bit weird, but the X-Men animated series and Batman the animated series were shows that really, really were ones that I connected with. So that was my first introduction, actually, to comic book characters. The gateway for me to comics was animation. And so not only did these shows just completely inspire and move me, these shows led me to discover a career in clinical psychology. These are the shows that led me to be interested in how to relate to humans, how does the brain work, how do relationships work, and so I ended up getting a PhD in clinical psychology because I was a giant nerd. So I really truly owe the work of animation creators, the talent, the stories, to my career.
Amazing. JB, how about you?
I relate a lot to that origin story, so to speak. I was one of those kids who grew up, I was 10, I remember it vividly, getting my first Spider-Man comic book from the library, like in a big, like black and white tome in my Nana's house, and reading it on the floor and just being like, oh, this is what comics are. And like realizing that level of storytelling was possible. And then I watched the X-Men animated series, the Spider-Man animated series, the Batman animated series, and I was like, oh, this is what it looks like in motion. And I heard these two women acting from, being on a panel with y'all is nuts. But like, just growing up knowing that like, oh, there's characters who look like me, who have superpowers and can do anything they can imagine. That made me fall in love with the world of superheroes and that way of storytelling. I've never wanted to go anywhere else but that.
Wow.
Jake?
Yeah, so my initial introduction was the arcade game, the Konami arcade game. That's where my love of Storm started. Because, again, like Colossus's yell, like, what the hell is that? But that's that tornado that can wipe the map. I was like, ooh, who's this? So, you know, my love started there. And then it wasn't the initial broadcast of the series, but it was when Pizza Hut did the promos. And they had X-Men Night of the Sentinels 1 and 2 on the VHS with the red foil. Got to watch Morph die over and over again and just have a little bit of trauma there. That's where my love came for, you know, being a fan of Star Wars, you know, being introduced to Princess Leia, and then being introduced to this, franchise. Strong female characters is always just kind of thing. It's like as it should just kind of just be, just like your characters for who they are and what they represent. So getting exposed to that at an early age and not understanding that I was being exposed to that and just what kind of propelled my love and sort of just unnatural, no bias. Like, just if the character's cool, put them in. Fuck, man, just make it about that. That, and then like JB, my local library had comic books, so I was able to get into the Claremont run first, and then ass backwards get into the first run of X Factor when Scott, Beast and everybody was still part of the team. And then once I got my own money as a kid, I was able to start buying the Jim Lee stuff. So yeah, that's my little nutshell.
I came to this late. When they approached me to audition back in 1992, I had no idea who the X-Men were. It wasn't until I was probably well into voicing Storm that I understood that this was a whole franchise with a whole series of comic books and, all these years worth of stories. Up until then, I was just dealing with a really cool character and some fantastically written scripts, and I loved them. I loved playing them. So, yes, I didn't know about the X-Men until I was one.
I love that quote. I didn't know about the X-Men till I was one. That's amazing. I didn't read the X-Men comics either. I wasn't really into comics when I was younger, but I was a very, I would say, imaginative and kind of lonely little girl. I was born in Australia, and we moved over to Canada when I was 8. And so I was uprooted, I didn't really know anybody, and we kept moving around a lot. And I had this weird, funny little Australian accent that all the kids made fun of in school. So I really was in this imaginary world where I wrote short stories and poems. I read a lot of sword and sorcery books. I loved C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia. That was my favorite. I loved that. I wished I could just go into a closet and end up in Narnia. Like, that would have been my dream come true. And I also read a lot of A Wrinkle in Time, Madeleine Delongo, and some of those amazing storytellers. And my grandmother got me into a mythology, like Greek myths and Roman myths and mythology around the world, and I love that stuff. And fast forward, when I started reading the scripts of the X-Men, when I booked the role the first time around, I realized a lot of the stories are very similar to the myths that we all love culturally right around the world. And I think that that's partly why our show, it continues on, and people of all eras can relate to it because the stories are universal. They're our modern day myths. So I just feel really honored to be part of this whole franchise and this part of doing X-Men and playing Rogue, who I love very much. I think she's a lot like Pele, the goddess of volcanoes in Hawaii, who she's like the creator and the destroyer. And I kind of like that.
Yeah.
She's fiery. Yeah.
To our creatives, JB, I want to start with you and work our way down. In so many interviews, we hear a very common question: what makes these characters so everlong, so enduring, so what makes them so iconic? And I think a very common and a very true answer to that would be because no matter who we are, we can see ourselves in one of these characters. I want to ask a similar question, but put a little twist on it. By the time you all started working on X-Men '97, you already knew how impactful and how iconic and how important these characters were to audiences. Going in, whether you're writing, directing, or performing these characters, what did you want to do to impact? How did you want to live up to that legacy in your own performances? JB.
That is a great question. I feel like it's so important to remember that these characters are people, but they're like larger than that too. There's something about these characters, the X-Men in particular, are so unique in being born into superpowers. They're not the mutates of the world who get their powers later in life as adults or teenagers who are like, oh, I got bitten by a spider. These are people who knew they were different and they have to grow and live with that. And I wanted to, when I come into it writing, I want to write characters who know who they are, but are also trying to find that at the same time. There's something really beautiful to a character who is never ceasing to grow, who is always like yearning for something more. When it comes to these characters, I always want to remind myself that this is a found family story. These are people who aren't necessarily connected by blood, but by a bond that's just as thick, just as strong. And when they get together, they are unstoppable. So reminding myself that they are part of a collective while also being individuals is so important. That was what made me want to do X-Men more than any other property, honestly. Like, this is a team effort through and through.
Excellent. Jake, what about you?
Oh, man. To be honest, one was just to be able to hit the bar.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a single day that went by that, the responsibility and the torch that we bear and the giants of, the shoulders that we're standing on because of the giants that came before us, it was never not on our mind. Like, and I fucking mean that. You just to be able to hit that bar and to be so loved and received by the fandom, by fans, from fans, for fans, is that's been awesome. But for myself as a visual director and storyteller, it comes down always to what is the story, what is the message, what are we trying to tell, what is the fundamental point, and how do we visually accomplish that? And to something that JB said, yes, this, and what you said earlier, this is, it is a found family. These characters withstand the test of time because we can all find ourselves in one mutant or several mutants, right? And the roster just keeps growing. and just to become part of that collective and take that in, and just to understand this is a found family. My favorite example to bring up is there's a difference between the X-Men and the Avengers. The Avengers just wing that stuff. The X-Men have a danger room. One of our favorite things that we did in episode 1, after that Sentinel rips the jet apart and they're flying down, if you notice Storm and Rogue, they just look at each other. It's a nod. It's like, oh, this is attack plan Delta B6 on a Thursday. Yeah. We got this. What's that? All the non-flying mutants, get captured by the flying mutants, and hopefully Scott makes it. No, but it just, they are a found family. They are a family. They are a unit. Being able to visually tell those things without having to always rely on dialogue or sound effects or time. Simple things like a nod. You just understand that they understand. And without you realizing it, you go, oh, they're a unit. So you're finding a lot of subtextual things like that to endorse and enforce the voice acting or the words on the script to give it visual representation. That's just kind of what my job is and what I get to work with a team to bring to the table.
Amazing. Allison, what did you want to accomplish bringing Storm back for this new audience?
I try very hard when I go into the studio not to think about the impact that my work could have. That's not my job. I try very hard to go in with the same freshness that I brought back in the early 90s when I had no idea who these people were, did not know that this was going to be a cultural phenomenon. I was just so lucky to play a kick-ass black woman, powerful as hell, negotiating her way through a world that despises her in a lot of ways and is terrified of her. And I need to keep that freshness, and I can't think about what the impact is. I have to go into that studio and give the clearest, most emotionally resonant reading I can of my lines on that particular day. And if I do that well and the rest of the team does it well, then obviously we're going to have an impact. But the impact is in the story, the impact is in the teamwork, and so I've just got to go in there and do my job the best that I can.
Really?
And keep my fingers crossed.
I hope they took the right take, and it appears they did in all cases in this season. Lenore, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree. An actor acts, and we all know our characters very well now, those of us who started off in the 90s with these characters. And so every time I get a script, I'm excited to see what side of Rogue we are going to see this time and what side of Rogue she is going to choose to show. Because I always think people are made up of hundreds of different types of roles inside of them, and we become different depending on the situation, depending on who we're dealing with, and also on what has just happened in our lives. So, when I get a script like episode 5, for instance, to be able to show the depths that Rogue has to go to, and then, and the peak of the energy and rage in episode 7, it's a gift for an actor to be able to go to those places, to be able to be given a script where you can actually do that and show people that side of yourself and the character. So I just feel really, really blessed that I was given that opportunity this season. I love Rogue's journey, and it's a real hero's journey, in mythological terms, it's a hero's journey. So I feel really blessed.
Wonderful. Drea, as a psychologist, why is X-Men 97 so important to you? What does this show do for you that makes you want to then go and spread the gospel to your clients and to the world?
Well, certainly the psychology in superheroes or superhero genres is really rich, right? You know, there's a lot of resilience storytelling and overcoming hardships. And, you know, JB was mentioning what the X-Men bring to the screen as far as a community of people who are just trying to live their lives, like just trying to survive in a world that wants to annihilate them. When I think about superhero psychology, because I started out in my career 15 years ago with like thinking, I'm going to do the white lab coat thing, I'm going to study clinical science and teach clinical science and kind of be in the ivory tower. And in that experience, I did not see myself. I see myself in X-Men. I see myself in the storytelling that I think can have the power and the access, you know, the engagement that I think, if I can maybe diss my own field for a second, we don't do a good job in the sciences, especially in psychological science, to give that knowledge away. So I sort of abandoned the discipline or the world of academics, and I came to media psychology so that I could provide public health education, engage young scholars to think about psychology in a different way, to mentor and give pathways for BIPOC folks like myself when we don't see ourselves in the sciences. But X-Men in particular, let me go back to that. What inspires me the most about the storytelling, and we see this a lot in X-Men 97, is the concept that as psychologists we call this liberation psychology. So in traditional psychology, a lot of that is about what's wrong with you? What is the problem inside you? Why are you ill? You know, why the illness is in you. In liberation psychology, the illness is in your world. The illness is in your social environment. The illness is the oppression, right? And it kind of takes this more environmental, social, layered, transgenerational look at why some of us feel anxious, some of us feel tired, some of us feel stressed out, some of us feel we don't, we are not seen. And this kind of storytelling allows us to experience something that's very uplifting, but also the sense that we can overcome these hardships. We can find community in the same way that X-Men do. We can find healing and restorative justice. I can do so much more with that kind of storytelling than the traditional psychology that I started out with.
JB, I want to ask you, when you're sitting down able to write an episode like Bright Eyes, obviously this is an episode that's going to require a lot of nuance, subtle touches, and it's really all about grief and how we handle it on a multitude of levels. I want to ask you if you or any of the writing staff are given access to psychological consultants or someone who can help you write that level of grief, and if not, how were you able to do it so well?
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Marvel is incredible at giving writers access to a bevy of consultants. I was very lucky to be in the Moon Knight writers' room before I was on the X-Men writers' room, and we had consultants for every level of that process. And then on X-Men, we had consultants for every level of that process. Jake and I were on a lot of Zoom calls with a lot of different consultants on X-Men 97. And we had people who came in and told us how characters might respond to certain things in real life, and then we would extrapolate that going forward into, the comic book world that is X-Men. I will say my co-writer Charlie Feldman and I both have experienced immense grief in our personal lives, and when you can put that on the page, it helps to make it feel real. And it also helps that we have characters who have been lived for years before us, so we're building on that foundation, the shoulders of giants, as you said before. So we're kind of channeling that energy into characters who we knew already had dealt with several hardships. Like when I think about Rogue and how she grew up, like her relationship with her father, her relationship with Gambit, knowing her dynamics before episode 7, it's so raw. It's so already present that we're just turning the next page and we're just cranking it to 11 is what we kind of went in doing.
For our voice cast, I would like to ask you about your own processes. You discussed a little bit about going in and delivering that best performance that you could on the day in that moment. But when you're dealing with shows that have characters with this level of depth, from the moment you receive those scripts to the time that you're there in front of a microphone, what is that process for you? What are you going through to get to that place, to let them into your head or for you to get into theirs?
Well, I like the fact that you talked about letting them into your head, because that's more the way that I think about it. I do not know that there is, for example, a definitive Storm that I can say, okay, this is Storm and I'm going to get into her head. I'm playing Storm. If somebody else played her, they bring their own experiences of the world, their lived reality. That's what they bring to the character. And I think that's what makes it rich. I'm not trying to pretend that I can be Storm. I take what I know of Storm, I drop it into Allison, and first of all, I have to trust that in me, and I think that's what, when you're a good actor, that's what you're able to do, is access all of yourselves and all of your experiences. I'm not a psychologist, but I do know that as we grow up, a lot of what we do is shut down, and we close off, and we shut out the 8-year-old who was hurt, and we close off the angry 13, 14-year-old, and we shut off the 20-year-old whose heart was broken, and we just shut them off, and we leave them one side because, you know, how do they help us? We have to grow up. We have to grow past our traumas. And the one thing that we're good at as actors is being able to access all of those Allisons. And I have to believe that the richness and infinite variety of experiences and feelings and emotions are right in here. And so what I do is I take what I know of Storm, and I drop it in, and it gets, you know, it goes through that mesh, and then it comes out. And again, as Lenore said, you know, we're lucky because our jobs are made easier when the stories are strong and when the writing's solid and good. And then you don't have to fish, you don't have to. I do a lot of theater, and I've done a lot of sort of new plays. And you're up on stage there trying to make that shit work. You know, you're putting your all out there because you know it needed another like 5 drafts before it went up there. But there it is. And we are lucky as hell because if we trust ourselves and if we trust that we have the richness and diversity of experience within us to do this, that we have enough inside, and that's what I call that inside-out acting. I could go on forever. This is all about acting process, and you know, this is what I do. I could give a 3-hour workshop, and I won't. But there's all of that. There's that inside-out where you take what you know and you drop it in, and you trust that you have it inside. And then, of course, there's what outside in. Because when you get into that studio, it's also about technique, right? Mm-hmm. It's mic technique. It is, you know, you've rehearsed it at home, and you take nice, long, dramatic pauses because surely that works. And then they get in there and they go, that's really nice. Could you, you know, like...
The time that took gave me so much anxiety.
So it's that. And again, you have to have done your homework because when you get in there, it's things like, okay, am I hitting it in the right part of my chest? Has she crept up into my head voice? Is she getting too bassy? Am I too fast? Is the accent right? I mean, I tell a story once with X-Men, the animated series, and I was okay, I'm getting off topic, but I was working all day, right? So I've got Monday is the only day that I can perform because I'm out in Stratford and I'm doing Shakespeare. So, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff I got to get through, and I'm knocking them off. I'm really good. And then we went to lunch. We come back in, and I hit it again. And I see them, because at this point it's not on Zoom, you know, the director's right there. And I see the look on their faces, and they're like, that was good. Allison, now could we really get to work? I'm like, okay, I thought I was. And so I do it again. And they're like, okay, we're not kidding. Like, you know, you need to do this. I don't know what happened, but Storm left the building. She left. So yes, our work is inside out acting and outside in acting. And we're just, you trust, you stay open. The biggest thing that you can do as an actor is be open. Open to the character, open to your own personal experiences, and open to what the director is trying to get you to do that day, because ultimately, that's your job. Not your homework, not what you think Storm might be, but what the director says you've got to do.
Shut up now.
Amazing.
What was the question? What was the question?
I'm curious about your
again?
process.
Process.
From that moment that you read that script, and you read just how much Rogue has to do a complete conversion, even in her own thoughts about the relationships between
Gambit and Magneto.
and humans and mutants.
As Allison mentioned, you know, we pull from our own experiences and our own emotions. And I definitely have been blessed with a very large bag that's very deep of emotions. And I've also had like a lot of really intense experiences in my life. I have, in my 20s, been a wanderer going around the world by myself, and sometimes some good things happen and sometimes some very awful things happened. And also in my life more recently, I had major grief when my young niece, who was only 17, passed away from cancer. And I'd been grieving by myself in my house for a number of months when I got the script of episode 5, Remember It. And as Allison mentioned, oftentimes we have to do our emotional homework. But in this instance, I said to myself, well, I don't have to do any more emotional homework. I've already done my emotional homework for this. I'm just ready to just do it and let it come out. And it was extremely therapeutic to be able to express my authentic grief in such a way and to only use my voice to be able to express it. Really, it was a gift for me to be able to do, and I really hoped that the audience listening to it would feel that true grief in my voice, and if they had experienced any of that in their own lives, it would trigger them to also feel it again, and therefore maybe have a cathartic experience and be able to release that in tears, in grief, in letting it all out. And I hoped that that would become a healing experience for people. And it was amazing for me to wait and see how people reacted to episode 5. And then to see in real time on the internet people going, oh my God, you just broke me. You know, your voice, you know, Sugar, I can't feel you, broke me. And I have to say a shout out to Jake and the team, because their decision to, and I think it was your decision, Jake, but their decision to cut to black, that just does it. Because it's so empty. When you lose somebody that you love so deeply, and to lose them, and you know, I pictured my beautiful, sweet little 17-year-old niece lying there in front of me, and I went up to her, and she was barely warm, and she just was starting to get pale, and I'll never forget that feeling. And so I put that all into my work, and I hoped that that would, help create a performance that would move people. And I hope that it did that, but it seems like it did. So that's a good thing, and that was a good thing for the audience, and it's a good thing for me. So that's about it.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. There's a very important line of dialogue in an episode called Life, Death, Part 2 that really struck us when we heard it. And it's spoken by the adversary, who is this big creature that is picking on Storm because she's lost her powers. And in many ways, she's lost herself. She doesn't even really know who she is anymore if she's not a mutant. And the adversary says to her, "Believe the lie." Dre, I know that meant a lot to you. What does, talk about that moment and in that episode. What did you see there?
And by the way, Allison does both voices, right? The adversary and Storm in these scenes together. It's incredibly powerful. And I think it's open to interpretation. Mm-hmm. I do believe it's one of the most powerful narratives in the season. They're also powerful, but the reason it really sat with me and I was impacted by it is that I felt as though the adversary was this manifestation of Storm's inner critic, this, sometimes we might call it the shadow self, the kinds of things that actually both Allison and Lenore are talking about, the burdens and heaviness that we carry with us, and sometimes they can be our worst enemy. They can be very harsh, and sometimes they come from the people and the systems around us, and we've internalized them, and we carry around those ideas. I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I'm not strong enough. The lie, the line about the lie is really, really powerful because I understood that Storm needed to overcome the lie. The lie in my interpretation of this is that those are the ideas, the schema, the forces that are these negative things about you that aren't true. And yet, you cling to them and you operate with that and you have it within you. And it's not until, and so believe the lie is like, stay oppressed and stay in this, beneath this veil, beneath this shadow. And so to overcome that, you have to let go of the lie. You have to dismantle the lie and start to believe in your authentic self, which is usually a much more supportive force within yourself. Allison, how did you interpret that line?
That there is a way to be that will allow you to be accepted, that will fight against all the microaggressions so that you're not tired all the time. That if you're just small enough, not too arrogant, not too uppity, not too flamboyantly yourself, if you're not angry, if you keep it all hidden. In the Caribbean, we talk about small up yourself. If you small up yourself enough, if you're not scary, if you're one of the good ones, the safe ones, if you don't scare people, if you don't intimidate them, the lie is that you can find a way to be that will allow you to navigate life so that you're not constantly tired. And there is no way to do that. So when I think all of us sort of try sometimes not to be too flamboyant, not to be too angry, not to let the rage show, not to let your ambitions show, not to be too smart, never be too intimidating. And I think that's That's the lie. Find that there is a way to make yourself just right so that you will be accepted, that there are corners of yourself that you can rub off and you will be embraced if you can just be right.
Amazing.
I actually want to bounce off of that interpretation, which I find kind of is threaded through the show. You might find, I just actually want to ask JB about how this actually comes up with the way non-mutants treat mutants in the series. And I actually texted you after I saw this scene with Trish Tilby, the journalist, and Beast, because she was basically saying, "You're too much." That was my understanding when after this big, essentially the genocide, where up till that point they had somewhat of a trusting relationship. And there's something specific I do want to ask you, because they have that exchange where he realizes she's saying some of these messages to him very directly, like, yeah, your fight is too loud. Your fight is too much. You need to calm down. And Beast actually makes the animators threw in an expression, just a little kind of eye, movement of the eye. And I think it was right before that, he pulls the curtain closed so that Trish and her camera crew don't see the injured mutants in kind of like the base camp following this war trauma. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, if you had any part in it. I first understood it as, Beast is so kind, he doesn't want Trish to see all of the horrors, like the injured, the potential, ghastly things. And then I thought, no, I think he's saying here, we don't make this theater. We don't want our trauma on TV for folks to fetishize us and make us your, I don't want to be your clown, basically. Anyway, talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I honestly believe that Beast's intention in that moment is to protect the other mutants who have been devastated in Genosha. That he knows the trauma, the strife, the peril of being, persecuted from day one. And he knows that Trish is looking in with that curious eye of that reporter who just wants to get to the bottom of it, and it isn't considering them to be people, is more considering them to be a story to just invest in. And he knows that they are more than that. He needs to keep them from being treated as just the trauma of it. I really love that in that moment you get that dynamic between Beast and Trish that has been built up over several episodes at that point. And you realize he cares for this woman, but he cares for mutants as well. And he's never going to sacrifice his own people for one woman who has shown interest in him, romantically or otherwise. He knows at the end of the day, he has to be the person who stands up for other mutants.
Yeah.
I want to ask, many people, they may not understand that Lenore is a bit of an X-Men and hero herself, having actually walked the walk. In Canada, you served in politics for quite some time, advocating for those less fortunate, less powerful, certainly. Yeah. And I want to ask you about that advocacy work. What sparked that in you, and what does it mean to you now?
Wow, thank you for that question. First, I've got to say what Allison said about the small yourself up now. Yeah, I mean, I liken it to oftentimes, you'd better not shine too brightly. Don't shine too brightly because it might make people feel uncomfortable because they're not quite as bright. So you have to dim your light down. And I've had to do that a number of times. And it's very difficult because in a way, you can't really just be your authentic self. So I got tired at one point of saying other people's lines. And I wrote a play called The Marilyn Tapes about Marilyn Monroe and her struggles in her life and her struggles to be taken seriously. And I did it in New York for about a year. And people loved my writing. They loved what I was talking about women and size, you know, that their bodies, they're transfixed with how their bodies look. And I said, like, I wanted to show, here's a woman who has everything, supposedly. You know, she's beautiful, she's voluptuous, she's got these men falling at her feet, she's famous, she's wealthy, but she's so lonely, and she's trying to fill this hole, this void inside of her with all these outer things, men, fame, booze, and drugs, things like this that don't work. And so when I realized that people were actually liking what I had to say politically, I realized I want to take the mask off and not be like a character anymore. I want to just be myself. So I was asked to run for politics, and I ended up winning. I won 4 elections in a row. It was pretty amazing. Thank you. 12 years of elected office, ending up first statewide, and then I went federal and became a member of parliament along with Prime Minister Trudeau. And I did introduce a bill that just got passed the other week called an Act to Address Environmental Racism and Environmental Justice. And I think Rogue would be pretty proud of that particular bill, because it's about the disproportionate number of toxic waste sites, dumps, landfills, and corporate polluters that are placed on or beside racialized communities. And yeah. So thank you. So it got passed a few weeks ago. So I'm really amazed and pleased about that. But I got to say, you know, you have a female now running for your president here, and she is going to be under attack because people will say, small yourself down, or don't shine too bright, don't laugh too loudly, don't dance too wildly. I mean, to be a female politician is so hard. And there's so many people that just want to hate you for whatever reason. I call it misogyny. And sadly, women oftentimes will internalize the misogyny, and they'll start attacking another woman. And I'm like, why are they doing that? Don't do that. It's hard enough. And they'll attack the way you look, what you're wearing, how your hair is, how loud you laugh, whatever. So I think it's really important for us to get out and support the people who will make the changes that we believe in, that will make our world a better place, a more loving, kind, compassionate place where everybody feels welcome and we're all at the table. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
I believe we only have a couple of 4 minutes, I'm told. So I would love to open it up to a Q&A, but I'm afraid that we wouldn't get to enough questions to make it fair for folks. But I want to ask, everyone says that there is an X-Man or a character out there to represent each of us. I'm curious, Drea, let's go down the line. You tell me, who is that character for you? Who do you see yourself in when you watch the show?
After X-Men 97, it's definitely Beast.
This might not be a shocker, but I really relate to the character of Bishop. I've moved around a lot as a kid, and he's moved around a lot in time, so I can relate to that.
Oh man, this one's hard because it usually just depends on who I'm working with, you know, what character the day of, or just, you know, what the arc is. But I always say, you know, growing up, so as a child I loved Wolverine, but growing up I understand Psych. He's just trying to get everybody home alive, man. And I'm like, Wolverine's over there being a dick. Just get on the damn shit, bro. You know, and he's got powerful queens, and that he just says, yeah. You know, he understands his team, but yeah, it's true growth has been going from Wolverine, who's also, you know, guarded and has a code of honor, but has gone through a lot of trauma and internal stuff, so he shields himself. You know, that is something that I can relate to, you know, being a young, random, weird Chicano kid, right? Drawing in a corner all the time. But then growing up, just being in this chair and getting to work with this amazing team and just, quite frankly, just be a fucking awesome family. Just trying to get everybody home alive, man. Just making sure, you know, we stick the landing as best as we can with everyone involved. So.
Yeah.
Storm with a dash of Wolverine.
Read him the weather report. Oh, wow. I mean, I love Rogue. She's part of me and I'm part of her. But I'll tell you, I love Poison Ivy, too. I'd like to have her. There's a little part of me that loves Poison Ivy.
I can see that. I'm wondering, Jake, you mentioned it sort of depends on who you're working with at any given moment. Allison mentioned inside out, outside in. Is that also affecting you and your own performance as a director with these characters?
Oh, absolutely. So, just, like, my favorite example to bring up is fundamentally, as people, you know, getting into the psychology of things, we relate to who we're talking to via eyes, mouth, you know, brow, etc. But specifically, eye contact, lack of or more. Just depends on what the mood of the scene, et cetera, et cetera. What happens when you have a character that doesn't have that? Cyclops.
Yeah.
The whole you can't see Cyclops' eyes. You can't see Scott's eyes. How do we handle that? And something that I worked with our internal animation team very early on was glints. Whether he's got his Ruby Court sunglasses or he's got his visor or that sweet ass sweatband visor on the b-ball court, man. It's his glints, whether it's a rapid glint, a glint that slowly goes across the lenses, or it only hits one lens. That's one of the myriad of ways that I work with the team to figure out those subtextual things where you're being told how to feel, but you don't realize it. And it's not necessarily telling the audience how to feel, but it's letting you feel it, you know, showing the audience how to feel. So, but yeah, that's why, like, just depending on what character we're working on, what the acting we're trying to get across visually, my answer can change.
Well, we've been given the sign, so I'm afraid that's it. But I want to thank our panelists and our guests. I want to thank their teams for helping make this all possible. If you want autographs and photos with Lenore and Allison, they're down at 2834 all day tomorrow. So go check them out, please, because they're absolutely fantastic. All of them have been. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your convention.
I just want to thank the folks who are not on the stage, who are sort of behind the scenes, first and foremost, the Comic-Con staff and volunteers.
Yes, thank you,
who
staff.
make this all
Thank you so
possible.
much.
The team members, the reps, the agents, the team members, the media team, the folks that can make this happen, thank you as well for your hard work. I also just want to plug the Arkham sessions. If you want to hear more about psychology and X-Men, we are just wrapping up our recent season with the X-Men animated series from '92. It's called the Arkham Sessions. Find it anywhere you stream podcasts. Can I get just a big hand for Brian Ward for moderating the panel? And thanks again for our panelists.
Thank you, everybody.